Hadley, you have just spoken moments ago to the Ukrainian foreign minister heading from Washington to Istanbul. What did you hear from him?
Good morning, Dan. That's absolutely right. I had the chance to speak to Dmytro, Kuleba, the foreign minister of Ukraine, literally sitting on the tarmac waiting to take a flight from Washington to Istanbul, where he will then have to take another flight to a third country to drive into Ukraine because, of course, all the flights have been cut. He told me we are facing a fierce isolation of Russia. This is an attack on the world order. We're calling on the world to fiercely isolate this country. He also told me that he has confirmed, of course, that President Zelensky was right then speaking to President Biden. He said that 5 minutes after President Putin announced his intentions, they saw heavy artillery and rockets flying toward major cities, including Kiev, and observed ground invasion in the direction of Kharkiv. There is right now, he said, heavy fighting happening. And as he has told me previously, told the CNBC audience previously, Ukrainians plan to fight for their country. Already we saw them being issued weapons, as you know, by the government directly. Just a couple of weeks ago when I was in Kyiv, I sat there at a recruiting station, a civilian recruiting station, where they were calling on folks to come, civilians, and frankly take up arms in defense of their country. They were hoping to get that number to 130,000 strong within weeks. Those weeks, of course, the time were not given to them. He also said that they are calling on the United States, on the West generally, to immediately implement heavy sanctions, including immediate disconnection of Russia from the SWIFT system. He said that Ukraine does need more access to heavy weaponry. He asked for further financial assistance. And he also said again and again, this is an attack on the world order. We need Washington. We need European capitals to act. This cannot go forward. And he also told me, of course, that he's looking for further conversations, further action, frankly, from NATO leaders as well. Dan?
And Hadley, of course, the West has said, as you say, that it will hold Russia accountable. The US and allies also announcing that they will respond in a united and decisive way. But sanctions announced earlier this week do not seem to have been a deterrent. So is it a belief now that an additional round of sanctions will actually halt this Russian invasion into Ukraine?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Because when we were talking for months now, frankly, since these interviews, I started doing these interviews back in December, the Ukrainians from day one, as you'll remember, were calling for sanctions now, because if we waited until the invasion actually happened, they explained to me again and again, it would be too late. And it seems, sadly, as if they were in partially right, at least, because the sanctions, as you mentioned, that were announced earlier this week, not only didn't act as a deterrent, but what sanctions now would stop Vladimir Putin? That's the big question. And would that be a swift disconnection? Because at the end of the day, we saw everyone, whether it be the Chancellor of Germany or, in fact, the President of the United States, refusing to sanction the energy sector. And this is a petrodollar economy. Russia is a petrodollar economy. Their revenues come from gas, from oil. And this idea that they're going to be able to deter a country without really getting at the heart of what makes their economy tick is a farce.
Hadley, talk me through what preceded this event unfolding today. We've heard earlier that Putin has said he wants to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, but he has, of course, had long-held views about Ukraine's status in Europe and the wider world, right? I know you've spoken to him previously, only as early as last year, discussing all of these issues. At the same time, you've been speaking with leaders from Germany to Ukraine and beyond. Take us inside the Russian mind meld at the moment.
You've got to wonder at this point what the circle surrounding Vladimir Putin really thinks. I mean, we saw that very, very strange theatrical press conference in which President Putin basically knew the answer, if you will, before he started the questions with his security chief and questioning his foreign minister as well. Essentially, what we understand about Vladimir Putin is that even since his time as a KGB agent in East Germany, he has had a very strongly held view about what is good for Russia, and the fall of the Soviet Union was, frankly, obviously, very, very difficult for him. He said again and again it was the greatest mistake, the breakup of the Soviet Union, that ever happened for Russia. He has again and again criticized his predecessors for allowing that to happen, and he has a very strong view of the West, frankly, that they have been working in kind of a conspiratorial way over the last 20 years to surround Russia. not just as NATO allies, but as European allies and Western allies as well. So, I mean, this is someone who has distinct views on what Russia should actually look like. And we heard that in his speech earlier this week. He was harking back to the days of Lenin. He said, don't blame me for the fact that there is even a Ukrainian state. Look at what happened during the Soviet Union. Ukraine was essentially created in its modern form by the Bolsheviks. So I enjoyed that history lesson, I've got to say. But certainly if you'd been sitting in Kiev, you would have been incredibly uncomfortable with the fact that he was literally spelling out the fact that he does not believe that this country has a right to exist.